I gotta get this off my chest. I've been looking for anyone who's gone through something even remotely similar to what happened to me. I mean, part of me was hoping I just cracked, you know. But it's been months, and I still have zero clue what to believe. Doesn't matter, though. What I saw, what I felt, that's as real as it gets. And let me tell you, every time I reach for a doorknob now, my hand shakes like a leaf. So, here's the deal. I was house hunting. Yeah, I know, a 27-year-old homeowner. Sounds like a fantasy, right? Look, I've been lucky, I get it. But I wanted something out of the way, you know? Lots of space, and if possible, not costing a kidney. I'd been looking close to the city, but everything was way out of my budget. It wasn't until I started looking at these podunk towns in the middle of nowhere that I found anything even close to affordable. I'd already hit up 4 open houses that week when I saw this ad online. It seemed too good to be true. Another open house, but this one was perfect. Apparently, the sellers were desperate for a quick sale after some previous deal fell through. The place was in this tiny town called Harmony Creek. I drove out there, and sure enough, there's this little billboard with a goofy blue sunflower on it, welcoming me. I took a hard right down a street called Sunbeam Lane. There were only like 5 houses on the whole street, and the one I was there for was all the way at the end. Even from a distance, I could tell I wasn't the only one checking it out. I parked on the street and took it all in. There was an open house sign out front, again with that sunflower logo. There was a separate garage, and the house itself was smaller than the pictures made it seem, but still cozy, you know. This chipper guy greets me at the door. He's got these thick glasses, a hairline that's staging a strategic retreat, and this goofy grin that makes you think he could get away with murder. "Come on in," he says. "You're gonna love it." Inside, there's me, the realtor, let's call him Bob, and 3 other people. There's this older couple, looked like they were in their 50s, and this younger woman. She had this messy black hair that kept falling in her eyes, and I swear, even at first glance, you could tell something was off with her. She looked totally freaked out. She wasn't even looking at the house, just kept staring at everyone else. The house itself was pretty simple. Downstairs there was a bathroom, a little study, a kitchen, and a living room, all connected. Stairs went up to a sort of loft area, which made the living room feel huge. Upstairs there was another bathroom, the main bedroom, and a guest room. The whole place had this weird 70s vibe, with this faded gray and white flower wallpaper. It was a little beat up, a few scuffs and tears here and there, but the bones of the house seemed solid. Bob, the realtor, was giving me the whole sales pitch, showing me all the features in the kitchen. He made a big deal about how most of the appliances were gonna be replaced before anyone moved in, and showed off this brand new garbage disposal like it was the crown jewels. It was a decent kitchen, I guess, but I couldn't stop watching that woman, the one with the messy hair. She was just standing outside the study like she was guarding it or something. Then the older couple, they went downstairs and asked her, all polite, if they could take a peek inside the study. "No," she says, just like that, with this little shrug. "You can't." Bob, he smiles at them, all apologetic. "Don't mind her," he says. "Of course you can, but the woman, she's not having it." "No," she insists again. "Thee can't." Bob walks right up to her and leans in, and his whole vibe changes. He's not Mr. Friendly Realtor anymore. They start arguing, low voices, back and forth. I hear her say over and over, "This isn't what we agreed to." The older couple and I just kind of stood there, awkwardly watching them argue. We introduced ourselves. I gave them a smile and told them my name was Alex. They were Martha and Earl, your typical, friendly Midwestern folks. They said something about being Humpty Nesters and wanting a fresh start. They weren't shy about how much they liked the place, although Martha was a little hung up on not having direct access to the garage from inside the house. Earl, on the other hand, was worried about the soil. He wanted a big garden, and he was convinced the ground wasn't right for it. Still, Martha was beaming. "Best place we've seen so far," she said. "Sure is," Earl agreed, giving her a little nudge. Meanwhile, Bob and the woman are still going at it. I overhear him call her Sarah, and she is not backing down. Finally, Bob just pushes past her, shoves his key in the lock, and says, "Right this way, folks. We'll just take a quick peek." "We're not done in there," Sarah cries out. "You can't just—" It was supposed to be packed up. "Sarah, I can't help it if you're late," Bob says, his voice tight. "That's not—" "Please, just give me an hour," she pleads. "You've had plenty of hours." He throws the door open. The three of us, me, Martha, and Earl, we give Sarah this apologetic look as we step inside. And let me tell you, that study was a mess. So, we step into this study, and it's like a bomb went off in there. Clothes everywhere, papers and books scattered all over this beat up old desk, and a whole wall of bookshelves crammed with textbooks. Everything from advanced calculus to something called philosophical physics was in there. I just stood there for a minute, taking it all in. Sarah, she pushes past us, grabs an empty cardboard box from the floor, and starts throwing stuff into it. "Don't touch anything," she says, her voice shaky. "Just look and then leave." Bob, he leans over to us and whispers, "You have to excuse her. There were some complications with the former owner." "Oh, is she the daughter?" Earl asks, his voice full of concern. Bob just nods. While Bob's going on about the east facing windows and the top of the line air conditioning, I can't stop watching Sarah. She's digging through that desk like a woman possessed, stuffing photos, notebooks, and these little trinkets into one of her boxes. You could tell she hadn't slept in days. She kept yawning, these huge jaw-cracking yawns. Martha seemed like she wanted to just leave Sarah alone to, grieve or whatever. But Earl, he's all about the practical stuff. He's checking the hardwood floors, poking at the window insulation, looking for any signs of pests. At one point, he almost knocks over this little coffee table, and Sarah comes running. She catches this vase that was about to fall and break. Don't touch anything," she cries out, her voice cracking. If you have to be in here, just stand still." "I'm sorry," Earl stammers, looking sheepish. "I was just go over there." Sarah waves her hands around, and I notice she's shaking the vase. There's this rattling sound coming from inside. She shakes it again, and I swear I saw all the color drain from her face. Carefully, she tips the vase over, and something dark and heavy drops into her palm. It's a key. A big old-fashioned bronze key. Sarah stumbles back, letting the key clatter to the floor. She covers her mouth with her hand, like she's forgotten how to breathe. We're all just staring at her, thinking she's having a full-blown meltdown. "Nobody move." She gasps, her eyes wide. "Nobody do anything." We all froze. Martha and Earl were barely breathing. I suddenly became hyper-aware of my feet, like if I even shifted my weight, something terrible would happen. Bob, though, he's not impressed. If anything, he's totally fed up with this whole situation. He rolls his eyes, picks up the key, and says, "Sarah, I'm sorry, but you're going to have to wait outside. Please, put that down," she begs, her voice trembling. "You can put it with your things and take it outside," Bob says, his voice hard. "Just don't move," she says. "You don't know what you're—" Bob opens the study door, steps out, and heads straight for the front door. Sarah drops everything and runs after him. Me, Martha, and Earl, we're right behind her. "Wait," she yells. "Please, wait." As soon as Bob puts his hand on the front doorknob, Sarah stops dead in her tracks. "Bob, please, I'm sorry," she says, her voice barely a whisper. "Just step away. Give me the key. I'll leave, I promise. I swear." "That's enough of that," Bob says, and he throws open the door. He takes one step forward, the bronze key passing the threshold out of the house. We'd all made it into the main living room by now. And that's when I heard it. The study door slams shut, like someone shoved it with all their might. There's this weird pressure change, like when you're on a plane and a gust of wind blows through the living room. Every door in the house slams shut with a click. all except the front door, which is wide open. But there's nothing there. Not nothing, like nobody's there. Nothing like a void, just a blank black space where the outside world should be. It was like looking into a bottomless pit, a viscous fluid where sunlight should have been reflected. I stared at it, totally mesmerized. The bright sun was still streaming in from the living room windows, but in that doorway was this endless abyssal ocean. And in that darkness, shapes. Tall, elongated, humanoid silhouettes. Bob tries to step back, but it's like parts of him are frozen in place. His arms are locked, like some invisible force has a hold of him. And as he tries to pull away, something starts pulling him in. His limbs start stretching, twisting, his knees bending at these impossible angles. His scalp pulls back, the skin of his face stretching so tight you could see the whites of his eyes all the way around. Help, he manages to choke out, just one word, before he's yanked into the darkness. I heard his limbs quietly ripped from their sockets as his body was bent, twisted, torn, and mangled. Black water mixed with marrow as those dark shapes turned Bob into what looked like a cloud of flesh and cloth, swirling in that black void. Sarah throws herself forward and slams the front door shut, leaving the bronze key on the floor where Bob had dropped it. Screams erupted, and it took me a second to realize they were mine. It was this primal scream, like a baby wailing for its mother. Martha backed into a corner and slid to the floor sobbing, with Earl trying his best to comfort her. Sarah just sat there, staring at that bronze key, her face covered in a cold sweat. My stomach felt like it was going to turn itself inside out. I stumbled towards the bathroom. Sarah tried to stop me, but she was too slow. I burst through the bathroom door and collapsed on the floor, hyperventilating. Sarah stayed outside, looking at me with this horrified expression. You're fine, she said, though it was clear she didn't believe it herself. You're okay. I wasn't. But compared to what happened to Bob, being a panicked mess on the bathroom floor felt like a blessing. Sarah stayed with me while I tried to get a grip. After a few minutes of just sitting there, shaking, Martha and Earl joined us. We were all silent, just staring at each other, trying to process what we'd just witnessed. Finally, Sarah excused herself and came back with a stack of notebooks. She sat down across the hall from me, making sure not to actually come into the bathroom. My dad. He found something, she said, her voice flat. I wasn't sure exactly what she meant, but it seemed important. We should leave, Martha said, her voice trembling. We should leave right now. We can climb out a window, Earl suggested, though he didn't sound too sure about it himself. If the door is, please. Sarah sighed, cutting him off. Just stay. We'll figure it out. I mean, no offense, Martha said, looking at Sarah with a mixture of pity and fear. But what on earth was that? Sarah flipped through one of the notebooks, found a page, and started reading aloud. I've been marooned in this house for 30 days. I never know where the door is. Sometimes I can hear water, sometimes not. I tried the windows, but it nearly burst my eardrums from the pressure as water came rushing in. I can't leave. I can't move. They wait behind the door. They wait for me to open. Sarah scratched her head, looking just as confused as we were. Martha kept looking back and forth, like she was waiting for someone to make sense of all this. Earl just shook his head, speechless. What? What does that even mean? Martha finally asked. What happened? It has to do with the doors, Sarah explained, though she sounded like she was trying to convince herself as much as us. They wait behind the door. There's nothing there, Earl insisted, his voice rising. There's light coming through the windows. It's not that easy. It's when you open it, Sarah said, her voice trailing off. That doesn't make any sense. Sarah stood up and handed Martha 3 of the notebooks. We can argue the details of Dad's quantum entanglement experiment later, but that's not going to help us. So let's just go then, Earl said, his voice tight with frustration. Let's leave. You want to take your chances on the front door, that it won't come back. Sarah challenged. Go ahead. Earl took a few tentative steps towards the front door. Martha wanted to protest, but she just started looking back and forth between Earl and Sarah, her eyes wide with panic. Sarah crossed her arms and turned away a silent dare. Can't hear anything, Earl said, his hand hovering near the doorknob. Are you sure it's there? It's somewhere, Sarah said. I don't know the rules. It has to do with the doors. I finally managed to get up off the bathroom floor and looked at them both. You put yourself at risk, Sarah said to me, her voice accusing. That could have killed you. The bathroom, the door to the bathroom, any or all of these doors. It could be connected. She grabbed one of the notebooks back from Martha and flipped to a page near the back. She started reading again. The framework of passageways, a concept of thought, paired in alignment. The darkness, standing shy from the mirrored back of an Imperium realm, unwilled and unbound, misshapen by the collective subconscious. We cannot pass. Our world forgotten, blocks dissipated like a bridge cannot be built of water, and a house cannot be built of wind. But the great craftsman blames not his tools, and eternal gold can be found in humble bronze. Bronze, I said, my voice hoarse. Like the key. Look, my dad. We weren't on speaking terms, Sarah said, her voice thick with emotion. I've looked at all this for days, and all I can tell is that he was off his rocker. He died in that room. She pointed towards the study. Martha hugged Earl tight, holding back a sob. He couldn't leave, Sarah continued, her voice barely above a whisper. He was convinced that the door would eat him. Martha sat down at the kitchen table. Thankfully, there was no door between the kitchen and the main living room. Earl walked right up to Sarah, grabbed her by the collar of her blouse, and slammed her up against the wall. His calm demeanor finally cracked. We shouldn't be here, he yelled, his face red with rage. This is your fault. I didn't know, Sarah cried, struggling against his grip. It was all just ramblings. I didn't have time to clear it all out. How could I have known? You recognized the key, Martha said, her voice accusing. You chased after him. You asked him to wait. That's the only part that keeps coming back, Sarah yelled, tears streaming down her face. Check the notebooks? The key. It's everywhere. It's everything. So what do we do? Earl asked, his voice dangerously low. Do we use it or destroy it? Sarah looked down at the pile of notebooks she'd managed to grab from the study. It was only a handful of everything we'd seen in there, but maybe, just maybe, it was enough to give us some kind of answer. The house had 6 doors. The front door, the downstairs bathroom door, the study door. Upstairs, there was another bathroom door, the main bedroom door, and the guest bedroom door. The downstairs bathroom door was already open, and we considered it safe, for now. I could step in and out without a problem. Sarah explained, as best as she could, what she'd gathered from her father's notes. He'd apparently become more and more paranoid after divorcing Sarah's mother. He'd locked himself in his house, devoting himself to his studies. He'd always been a bit agoraphobic, she said, so having a reason to never leave the house was kind of a twisted blessing. But over time, that blessing turned into a curse. She found an early entry and read it aloud. For years, I've longed for the presence of mind to devote myself, and now that I can, I find myself wanting. I can't be certain. There is a door, a passage. It binds itself, seemingly spontaneously. There is a risk involved, and it is a risk I cannot take. Earl tried to call for help, but when he held his phone up to his ear, water started pouring out of it. Sarah found another page, this one about semi-passages or shortcuts, things that could be used as portals to another person or place. They weren't as conceptually clean as a door, she read, and so they wouldn't invite them. But the connection would still go through that dark place, the place her father had somehow stumbled upon. I looked at the bronze key for a long time, lying there on the floor where Bob had dropped it. I didn't dare touch it. It was unassuming, in a way, old, with this weird blocky texture, like it was made of tiny squares. While Martha and Earl started frantically flipping through the notebooks, Sarah looked up at me. He just wanted a way to go wherever he wanted without having to traverse the space in between, she said, her voice heavy with sadness. To just go from one door to another. All he needed was a key. But why now? I asked. How are we trapped? The realtor Bob, sighed Whitney. You tried to leave with the key. I think that triggered that. So, how do we untrigger it? Sarah shrugged and pointed to the notebooks, defeated. We had endless discussions going in circles. Really? We compared notes, drew out these crazy theories. But nothing seemed to fit. Martha thought we could maybe force the bronze key out a window, but Sarah was convinced that would just leave us trapped inside with no way out. I suggested we listen at each door, try to figure out which ones were safe and which ones weren't. We tried it, but there was no way to tell. Sometimes I could hear rushing water on the other side. Sometimes scratching, other times nothing. And even when we went back to the same door, it sounded different each time. We considered opening several doors at once, a combined effort. We spread ourselves out. I was at the upstairs bedroom door, right next to Earl by the guest room door. Sarah was downstairs by the study door, and Martha, bless her heart, insisted on taking the front door. We all put our hands on the door knobs. I wasn't sure if I could hear something on the other side or not. My heart was pounding so loud it was all I could hear. There were 6 doors. 5 were closed, 1 was open. Someone was probably going to die. There is only ever one door, Sarah said, reading from one of the notebooks. He only speaks of it as a singular. It can change over time. She looked up at us, her eyes filled with a desperate hope. This is our best shot. We can't know for sure, Earl said, his voice tight. And why do we even want to open them all? There's nothing in the bedrooms, right? We're excluding, I said, trying to sound logical, like we did with the downstairs bathroom. We should close it. Martha said, her voice barely a whisper. Shouldn't that improve our chances of our other doors being okay? I have no idea. Sarah sighed, running a hand through her already messy hair. Are we doing this? Earl backed away from his door, taking his hand off the handle. It ain't right, he said, shaking his head. None of it. It ain't right. And then everything fell apart. Another argument. Earl couldn't bring himself to risk his life on anything less than a sure way out, and Martha just kept breaking down at the thought of that dark, horrible nothingness. I couldn't blame her. To this day, I still can't stop picturing it. Sarah, trying to be the voice of reason, read aloud again from one of the notebooks. The concept of the passageway. The door changes at the flick of a thought. An alien thought, like an invisible, uncontrollable shadow of the psyche. It refuses to be controlled. My exit could be my end, or, as likely, a wooden frame. Much like we cannot control the smoke of a campfire, we cannot foresee the turning of the passageway. We all looked at each other. Martha had collapsed by the front door, sobbing uncontrollably. Sarah was on the verge of a total breakdown. And me? I felt this enormous weight settle in my stomach, like I was missing something obvious. Let's take the door off the hinges, Earl said suddenly, a new determination in his voice. We'll turn it into an arch. Then it ain't a door anymore. You think that'll work? I asked. In theory, maybe, Sarah said. But how do we do that without opening it? We'll take the whole frame off, Earl said. There's a crowbar under the sink. Saw it when I was checking the garbage disposal dock. Martha bent down next to the sink and put her hand on the kitchen cabinet handle. I gasped. Was that considered a door? Could it kill her? Would it? I imagined that dark, cold abyss, that enormous force pulling me in, turning me into a formless mass. No, I cried out. Stop. But it was too late. Nothing happened. Martha opened the cabinet, pulled out the crowbar, and that was that. But for a brief moment, I realized how Sarah's father must have felt. That uncertainty. Not knowing for sure if that one flick of the wrist would be your doom or just nothing. Martha handed the crowbar to Earl. Sarah gave me a pat on the shoulder, but I couldn't stop crying. My whole body was shaking. Meanwhile, Earl walked up to the front door and started tapping the wood. The plan, as crazy as it was this: if there was no door, nothing could come through. There was no point in doing a test run, because if it didn't work, someone would die. It was better to just go for it, have a real shot at getting out. Sarah grabbed some towels. She had a theory that water might start leaking if the door was turned into a semi-passage, like a window. We might have to find a way to quickly stop the flow. By the time we gathered the towels, Earl had already started working on the door frame. As that first crack rang out, I heard a click. The front door slid open, just an inch. Without a second thought, Earl pushed it closed. We all held our breaths. We were fine. Nothing was happening. It's clear, Martha called out, her voice trembling. There's nothing there. I saw it. It was nothing. It can change, Sarah yelled back. We can't take that risk again. Like hell we can't. Earl put his hand on the front door again, but this time Sarah tackled him. The crowbar fell to the floor as Martha rushed forward to help. Listen, Sarah yelled, struggling to hold Earl back. Just listen. A rumble, like a whale passing in the distance. It was right there on the other side of the front door. Without a word, they all stood up and backed away. The door shook from the passing force. Something was definitely there. Then the rest should be fine, Earl said, his voice strained. We can get to the study. Sarah nodded, and the two of them took off towards the study at a run. Martha wasn't convinced, but she didn't know what else to say. As she bent down to pick it up, Earl threw open the study door. Darkness. Panic exploded all over again. Martha grabbed Earl's arms, trying to pull him back. Sarah crawled backwards, closing her eyes and covering her ears. I couldn't watch. All I heard was Martha screaming his name, over and over. There was a gargle, a scream turning into this inhuman screech, like a pig being slaughtered. Sebastian! Martha kept repeating, Sebastian, Sebastian. There was a click, and then nothing. Just crying. I looked up and saw Martha collapsed against the study door. It had slid shut from the pressure on the other side. I'm coming, Sebi, she cried, her voice broken. She opened the door again, and there was the study, just as we'd left it. Martha collapsed on the floor, curling up into a ball. She kept making this awful, keening sound, scratching at the hardwood floor like she was trying to dig Earl out of that void. There was nothing left of him, not even water droplets on the floor. Then there were her arms. She'd held on until the door had slammed shut. Her sleeves were torn and her arms were bloody. Not much, but there were these round, little suction marks, like what an octopus might leave. They were already bruising, with little spots of blood poking through the skin. I sat by Martha while Sarah started frantically searching through the study. More notebooks, more theories, more diary entries. Notes about experiments, clever tricks, and desperate attempts. So far, every idea we'd had to understand the rules had been useless. We couldn't be sure. No matter what, we could never be truly sure. 2 open doors, 4 closed. I don't know how many hours passed. I managed to get Martha to the couch, but she was inconsolable. She couldn't even understand words anymore. She didn't blink. She could barely breathe. There were no thoughts in her mind, just darkness. This awful, soul-sucking darkness. Sarah had propped open the doors that were still functioning with books and towels to make sure they wouldn't accidentally close. All the while, she kept trying to convince herself that we could still get out. We keep opening them, one by one, she said, more to herself than to me. If we can get it to manifest in one single place and keep that door open, we should be able to leave by another bar. The sun had started to set outside. For all intents and purposes, this still just looked like a house. The windows were clear, showing the trees and the grass outside. Maybe it was all a lie. Maybe none of it was really happening. But looking down at Martha, at her unblinking eyes, I knew it was the realest thing I'd ever experienced. There's 3 of us, I said, my voice hoarse. 4 doors. We can't make it. No, that's perfect. Sarah nodded, a manic glint in her eye. We open all but the front door. It manifests. Then we can get out through the one safe remaining door. Unless we all die, I said. There's nothing that says it can only be in one place, Da. It's implied, Sarah said, her voice tight. If you got a better plan, just tell me. But unless you want to starve to death, we got to. Starve. I interrupted. Is that what? I looked back at the study where Sarah said her father had died. No words were necessary. Sarah took a deep breath and nodded. He couldn't bring himself to try, she said. So, we had to ask ourselves what we wanted. A long, slow death by starvation, or a violent, terrifying risk at life. The fridge, the freezer, all the cupboards had been cleared out. Sarah found some raisins for us to share while we pondered our options. Martha couldn't eat. She just stared blankly ahead, waiting for her mind to come wandering back. It was dark outside now. Sarah rolled the bronze key between her fingers. I wonder how he did it, she sighed. He never made any sense to me. Maybe doesn't make sense, I shrugged. At least not to us. Then what made him so special? Well, he did have a lot of books, I said, reaching into the pile we'd gathered from the study. Just look at some of these. Astrology of Abraham, Channels of Esoteric Geometry. I like this one, I said, holding up a little red book. Diary of E.M.T. Rask. Right, but it doesn't beat. Sarah pulled out another book from the pile, turning it over. The 13 Faiths of the Blameless Mother. I shook my head, looking over at Martha. A handful of raisins slipped between her fingers. She didn't even bother to close her hand. Looking back at Sarah, I sighed. You're right, I said. We have to try. So we did. We lined ourselves up on the top floor. Martha, or what was left of her, on the far right, near the bathroom. I was on the far left, by the guest room. Sarah was in the middle, by the main bedroom. Martha didn't understand. She just mimicked us. We're going to open on 3, Sarah said, her voice trembling. And no matter what we see, just run. Run downstairs and just go. Get, I nodded. Martha didn't. 1. I tightened my grip on the doorknob. I saw Martha follow my lead, giving me an exhausted look. She could barely keep her eyes open. 2. I started doubting which way to turn the knob. I'd turned a million doorknobs in my life, but that was the first time I'd ever really thought about which way to turn it. I imagined myself hearing water bubbles, distant rumbles. I tried telling myself it was all in my head, fake, tricks of the mind. But in my heart of hearts, I knew it wasn't. 3. We opened our doors. All I saw was a neatly made bed, a bag of toiletries, probably Sarah's. I left the door open and turned around. Martha was smiling as the darkness welcomed her. Come on, Sarah screamed. Leave her. The door to the main bedroom was open, clear, but I was standing just 10 feet away from an endless abyss. Martha looked into it like she was searching for something. She touched the surface with an outstretched hand. Seb, honey, she cried. Sebi, please. A pulse shot through her. I could see the hair on her arm stand up, her veins turning black. Oh, Seb. And in an instant, her flesh unraveled, flaying itself from the inside out. Her screams were stifled as something pulled her in, leaving splotches of blood behind from the outline of her feet. A pained moan escaped her, only to be turned into harmless bubbles in that pressurized void. Sarah grabbed me by the neck and pulled me downstairs. We ran to the front door. We looked back one final time, just to make sure it was still manifested upstairs. It was. We'd sacrificed Martha, but we were going to make it out. Sarah pulled the front door open and stopped. Darkness. We'd been wrong. Sarah turned to run as an impossibly long arm grabbed the flesh of her back, right through her clothes. It pulled her backwards. I crawled away, not able to close my eyes. Help me, she cried out. For God's sake, help me. I shook my head, not knowing what to do. I'll never forget those desperate eyes. The betrayal, the pleading. She fought every inch of the way. She dug her nails into the hardwood floor, leaving deep scratches. She kicked, she pulled, she screamed. But for every second she stayed, the more painful it was. With a final sickening snap, the fingers dug into her spine, folding her like a lawn chair. Her lifeless body was dragged across the floor, unceremoniously pulled into the dark with a quiet squelch. The front door, slightly damaged by Earl and his crowbar, slid shut. I was all alone. The door to the guest bedroom and the main bedroom remained open. There was the downstairs bathroom and the study. Just two closed doors left. The bathroom and the front door. Both closed. Both wrong. There was no right answer. I must have stayed there for days. I found some trail mix in Sarah's bag. I had water. I could shower. I had a change of clothes. I scurried those notebooks over and over and over, trying to find the slightest hint on what to do. There had to be some way of knowing for sure. There had to be. It wasn't until I came across one final note that I realized it was over. It read, "By will alone, we cannot make ourselves right. Right is right, independently of our actions and intentions. We cannot control that which never was, and we cannot be part of that which will never be. There could be no more perils for me to face, and yet I cannot bring myself to leave. There is no certainty in the unknown, and I choose not to live by chance alone." I cried myself to sleep at night. I banged on the walls. I even tried opening a window, only to have my left eardrum blown out from the pressure drop. Got a nasty nosebleed, too. I tried praying. I tried making up little worlds in my head, imagining myself safe and sound. But it was useless. In those final hours of desperate loneliness, I knew I couldn't fool myself any longer. I was going to die. I found myself with my hand on the front door. I learned every crease of the wood, the temperature of the metal handle. I listened to it, studied it. At times it was quiet. At other times it wasn't. Sometimes I imagined it quiet. Other times I imagined voices coming from the other side. Maybe I wasn't imagining it. Finally, starving, exhausted, and mentally broken, I grabbed the bronze key. I opened the front door, sunshine. And there, on the freshly cut lawn, was another realtor, just as confused as I was. So, turns out I was only in there for about 16 hours total. And to this day, no one seems to remember Bob, Earl, Martha, or Sarah. According to every document I can find, the owner of the house had no children. The cars parked outside were unregistered. On paper, it seemed like the entire world had forgotten that these people ever existed. I don't think anyone's lying here. There was a sincere disbelief and confusion to every piece of my story. To onlookers, I seemed like a squatter that had gone insane. I've tried to find anything about this. They won't let me go back to read the notes. The investment firm that owns the real estate company swept it all under a rug and tore the place down. I suspect they were the ones who made the bronze key mysteriously disappear from the evidence room. I've tried to find copies of the books I found in there. Some of them have been seen in passing on strange message boards, and one just keeps making my computer turn off whenever I try to Google it. Who the hell is EMT Rask anyway? If anyone knew these people, or has heard about this phenomenon, please. I need to know I'm sane. I need to know this isn't all a dream. I need to know I won't wake up with my hand on that front door, having imagined living a life back outside. This has to be real. I am real. There is nothing on the other side of the door. Go ahead, listen. There's nothing there. It can't be, can it?